And you can sit or stand as you please. So we're first going to hear from David,
Okay.
and he's going to tell us why he thinks we ought to vote for 2-year terms.
Good evening, and thank you for bringing us all together to talk about these issues. And it's hard to get folks focused on these, and so it is very, very important. Here are the reasons I support going back to 2-year terms. Am I standing in the wrong place?
Yeah, just a little.
Okay, I'm sorry. And I've had 17 campaigns over the better part of, I don't want to tell you how many years, and most of them were city council campaigns. And the thing about, at least for me, a city council campaign, it's an opportunity to have a dialogue with the voters of the city. And it is truly an opportunity to engage, to exchange, and to learn. And I've always said that I get some of my best ideas from being with citizens and having their insights about how things could be better and what better source. And it turns out, of course, that not all the wisdom in the world is possessed by folks that happen to have degrees and wear ties and suits to work and so forth. So that's all very good. And I like campaigning, and I guess that's one of the reasons. Members of council, being human beings who are interested in the next election, rightly or wrongly, in my opinion, are far more engaged as an election approaches than they are when an election doesn't approach. And if you want a council that's engaged, and by that I mean attends community council meetings, civic functions in various neighborhoods and all the rest, you're more likely to get that if an election is coming up soon. And I always, when I was serving 2-year terms, if I were serving a 2-year term, then I would be running next year. So after the votes were counted in 3 weeks, this weight would settle on my shoulders, and I would think, now it's my turn. And that would rev up what I was doing and the involvement and engagement. And I think that's good. Now, people say they don't want to see elections every 2 years, and et cetera. And as we get into it, the alternative proposal, now there are 3 ways this could end up. The voters decide to go with 2-year terms. The voters decide to leave it as it is, which is 4-year terms, or they approve issue 11, which Greg is an advocate for, which creates staggered terms, which means we again would have an election every 2 years. So if the problem is having elections too often, I'm not sure why staggered terms addresses that problem. And I think it's simpler, frankly, just to go ahead and elect the whole council every 2 years. If you have staggered terms, the first time through is going to be very interesting because, and none of this applies to the current council. This would be the first election to which any change would apply would be the election of 2021. And if the staggered term proposal is approved, and by the way it works, if neither of them gets a majority of the votes, we stay with what we have. If both of them win, then there's some Ohio Supreme Court authority that says that the proposal that gets the highest percentage would prevail. So it's conceivable. Most votes.
Most votes.
Most votes, I'm sorry, yeah. However you want to measure it, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. Are you a lawyer?
No, somebody asked me earlier. I want to make sure I was right. Yeah.
So it's possible that the voters will approve both issues 10 and 11, and yet only one of them will be implemented. And then there's another interesting nuance. The first time around, if we had staggered terms, there will be a field race, and the top 5 will be elected to 4-year terms, and the next 4 will be elected to 2-year terms. And depending on who they are and whether they've served previously, those folks who serve 2-year terms, if they're elected 2 more times, will be able to, despite term limits that limit us to 8 years, will serve 10 years. So, now, let me tell you something else.
That's great. One more minute.
Okay. To bring it home, the current council has 6 people who are term limited. So 6 out of the 9 of us are lame duck members of council, and we have over 3 more years of service. So 2 of us are running for, 2 of my colleagues are running for mayor. One of my colleagues for a time was running for lieutenant governor. One of my colleagues has said, I'm never gonna run for anything else in the world. And two of us haven't said, because we have no idea. But if you're a lame duck, whether you're interested in a political career or otherwise, inevitably you're gonna start thinking about what's the next step? What can I do next to continue my career? And at least with a 2-year term, that doesn't set in until the last of the 2 years. So I think overall we're better off going back to 2-year terms. And those were the years that we had Bobby Stern, Charlie Taft, Guy Guggenberger, Peter Strauss, and Marion Spencer, absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay.
So hold your questions a bit.
Well, good evening. I'm Greg Landsman. I'm one of your Cincinnati City Council members, and let me first say a couple things. One is thank you for hosting and having this debate, and for being here and further educating yourselves, because I know it's not going to just inform what you do at the ballot box. It'll inform what you tell your friends and your family, and so on and so forth, which is a wonderful thing. I also want to recognize the incredible work that the league does every year, but certainly this year with the voter guide. It is so remarkably good. Not just the candidates, but on the issues, and I've been involved in a few of these. As I read them, it's spot on. The arguments for each are spot on. The arguments against each are spot on. So it's a wonderful contribution that the league provides, and I'd encourage you all to take, as I did last night and well throughout the election, take as many as you can and pass them out to people who wouldn't otherwise have, a voter guide. On 4-year terms, I'll keep it simple. I think going back to 2-year terms is a very bad idea. I think the idea that people will, it's so interesting because David and I see the same problem, and we have identified 2 different solutions. I do find it problematic that you have folks running right now, and it does make it more difficult. And my worry is that if you have all 9 people running all the time, constantly campaigning, constantly raising money, it'll be even harder to get things done. Whereas staggered 4-year terms is in my mind, the best of both worlds, because you have the ability for folks to focus on governing. They get 4 years, they can govern. But there's accountability in the sense that you get to check your council every 2 years, and because half of them will be up. And it's how almost every other local municipality government in the state of Ohio works. Right? Every county commission is staggered 4-year terms. I believe every school board, most, are staggered 4-year terms. Certainly ours is. Township trustees, you name it, most city councils are. So this really puts us in line with most other governments and allows, again, for individual council members to have the 4 years to focus on getting things done while giving the voters a layer of accountability we don't have right now, which is to check your council every 2 years. And when we went from 2-year terms to 4-year terms, we had the same issue of having some people be able to serve 10 years, right? Because right now you have the people who won in 2011 serving, they will ultimately serve 10 years, which was PG Sittenfeld, Yvette, had she stayed on, Chris Seelbach, and Wendell Young. So you do have and Smithman, yeah. So you have, anytime you change it, you're gonna have that scenario. But after 2021, it'll be staggered. So I very much favor it. I think it's the right thing to do. But I also genuinely appreciate the fact that David Mann, who is, a statesman among statesmen, decided that, it was important for voters to be able to pick. Either leave it as it is and vote against both, go back to 2-year terms, or stagger the terms, which I, by the way, think a lot of voters thought they were doing when they passed 4-year terms. I can't tell you how many doors I knocked on, and people said, I thought when I supported 4-year terms, it was staggered 4-year terms. So, in any event, that's it, yeah, okay.
Thank you. There are some arguments against the 4-year term thing that were not mentioned. One is that after a time, after a couple of elections and a couple of rounds, we currently have about 20 people who run for city council. And people have to run 3 or 4 times before they get elected. And the first time they're elected, they're usually at position 7, 8, or 9. And that means that they would never make the top 4 or the top 5. And one of the real concerns is that groups like the Charter Committee, Independent, and any other Green Party would rarely be able to get on council, and we very soon would have a full Democratic council. Another argument that's a problem is that right now you cannot run for city council and mayor. But with this, as I understand it, with this proposal, if you're not running for council this year, you're the 5 and this is the year they're going to be electing 4, you could run for mayor while you're still on city council. And I don't know whether that's a problem or not, but right now you have to make a choice. You either run for council or you run for mayor. And with this system, those that are not running for council could run for mayor. And I don't know whether that's good or bad, but that's an argument. Is there another opposition piece to that anybody is aware of? So I think after this is an important enough thing that we thought maybe you could write down your questions. If we can pass them over to the end of the row and pick up any questions.
Could I say something?
Yes, please do.
And it's not just that incumbents might find it difficult to, a slightly different point. If someone runs, now, if under the 2-year system, somebody runs, doesn't win, but creates a lot of interest and support, they can build on that and run again successfully 2 years later.
Right.
4 years is a lifetime,
Yes.
as Michelle
And if you have
Dillingham
to-
can
If you have
tell
to
you. I
run 3
mean,
times, you'd be
Yeah.
running for 12 years.
yeah, and you know, I just think it dramatically changes who can realistically aspire to build notoriety through running and then.
Right, thank you very much, David. I meant to mention that. Do we have some questions, Susan?
Yeah.
Why do we have corporate interest flooding our community with misinformation on issue 10?
Take it.
Is it about the people? What?
I'll take that one. So for those of you who didn't see the article, the business community, they are putting big money into issue 10. They want to go back to 2-year terms because it increases the number of people that could get elected who support their interests. And while I have a good working relationship with, I think, just about everyone, because I think that's how you get things done, I consider myself to be a very progressive, independent person. And I think they are very much of the opinion that if it goes to staggered 4-year terms, they're going to lose their influence. The big corporate, leaders are gonna lose their influence. And it's gonna even things out a little bit, which I think is a good thing. Especially for somebody who wants to see the city dramatically transformed. And we are a city of a lot of haves and a lot more have-nots. And the only way we're gonna change that is through a whole host of new policies aimed at rectifying these inequities. And I think the staggered 4-year terms will get you folks who do that. I think 2-year terms will get you the status quo, will get you the councils that you've had for decades. Now, one last thing, which is David makes a really important point about getting out and being with people. I will tell you, having run twice, there are incumbents who are always out there, like David. David's always out, right? I'm always out. There are some people that even when they're running for re-election, they never come out. They don't come to forums, right? And so at the end of the day, it really is the people you vote for, whether it's 2-year terms or staggered 4-year terms, or we stay with the 4-year terms that we have. You gotta pick people that are very engaged and constantly out and about, knocking on doors, coming to events like this. Forums, it's amazing to me how many forums we did in 2017 where you had incumbents who never showed up to any of them.
Thank you. I'm holding this in my hand because I do want to remind you, on page 19 of this who and what of election, little blue box at the corner talks about a note to voters on council terms for issues 10 and 11. And it's worth reading it and paying attention to it. The question here is there a cost, financial cost, to change the system either back to 2 years or to the 4-year staggered terms? And what happens to the position of vice mayor and president pro tem of the Senate, which are currently 4-year terms? I think that
Well,
might.
the mayor now and under the,
It's not on.
the, currently, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, currently, and with either change, the vice mayor would be selected by the mayor, the president pro tem is elected by the council. I guess
They would be 2-year terms.
2-year
in either
terms for the
case.
president pro, and the vice mayor also. And what
In
was the
either
other
case.
question?
Is there a cost to change
Oh,
the system?
The only cost that I'm aware of is, and it would be true of either change, you would have an election every 2 years instead of 4 years, and therefore, unless there's something else on the ballot that would require an election, the city would be required to fund the cost for the Board of Elections, which is, I think, in round numbers, $300,000 or something.
I mean, unless I'm wrong, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, the school board is on the ballot
That's right.
every 2 years, so it wouldn't cost taxpayers anymore to go back to 2-year terms or have staggered 4-year terms, because there's already an election for school board. The cost is really to all these people who put money into campaigns, because people will go back to constantly campaigning and raising money, which I think is a problem. So this, hopefully gets some of the money out of politics, but the big one is issue 13, which Don will talk about, and we have to pass that one. The last thing I'd say is, and I forgot to mention this, but I just forgot again. I keep forgetting this
I
one
got one more
point.
question to come for that. With a staggered 4-year term, would there be a way to build in a way to have council members do an annual public report to voters to assure accountability? So which one do you want to answer first?
I was so busy trying to remember what it was, I didn't totally hear, so I'm gonna let David answer the question, and I'll just say this. Oh my God, you're gonna forget.
It gets worse, Greg.
You're acting my age.
Just, I'm gonna say to you, go ahead on this.
Well, that's an interesting, ideally, that's something people do anyway. The mayor, under the charter amendment for direct election, is required to give an annual State of the Union address. He's giving one the 23rd at Music Hall. Some of us I know try very hard to report to our constituents one way or another, at least annually. My office does that. That's good politics. It's also good engagement. And with all respect to one of Greg's points, people are already raising money. They're already worried about the next election. That just happens. And I guess one of the problems is if you've got a 4-year term, you've got four years that you can raise money this spring, next spring, you can spread it out. So I think that's a reality no matter what, unless you're a lame duck, in which you don't have to worry about that. You don't have to worry about being terribly accountable and collect your paychecks.
I do think it comes down to the kind of people we elect. But anyways, I remembered what I was gonna say. It's not that good of a point, but one of the benefits of the staggered 4-year terms is that you'll have council elections again, which is meaning that right now the mayor the mayor's race is with the 4-year term, right? So, and it just, the mayor's race overshadows council, right? It sucks up all of the political oxygen, and council is really important. I mean, today at council, we overturned the third and fourth veto of this mayor. Like, council has a lot of influence, and it's important to know who your members of council are, and I think breaking it up and giving more attention to who we're electing to city council is a good thing.
Thank you, gentlemen. This concludes our first part, and